for the inaugural video of the Good Vibes Garage. Wanted to show you guys how I've got my 2018 Silverado set up. If you wanted to, you could do the same on 2014 through 2018 Silverados. What I went with were some trail terrain TAs from BFGoodrich for the tires, and I put on the Bilstein 5100 leveling shocks in the front, as well as the 5100 shocks from Bilstein in the rear. You don't get any added height in the rear with these shocks, but in the front there's 4 adjustable perches where you can get anywhere from the stock height to, I believe, a 2-inch level. I went with the 3rd perch there, so second from the top. You get 1.25 inches of level compared to the stock height. I really like what it did as far as eliminating the rake that came on these trucks from the factory. There was a lot of rake, and so my truck still has a little bit of rake, but it's sitting a lot more level than it did from the factory. So when I'm towing a light load, the truck sits almost perfectly level. If you were to have the truck fully maxed out towing with this setup, you'd probably be nose up. But I don't do that very frequently, so this setup works just fine for me. The reason I went with this setup was I took the truck on a long road trip to Maine, and if you have the Z71 package on your truck, you know the stock Ranchos aren't the best on this. They're pretty underdamped. Your rear end sometimes jumping across the road if you hit a sharp bump, and after a day of about 12 hours of driving, my passenger and I, we were pretty car sick after driving this thing. So I wanted to get it set up a little better, more responsive, more under control, and I think the 5100s achieved that. On the rear, it's a pretty easy install. There's just 2 bolts on each shock that go in. You can do that in your driveway in about a half hour fairly easily. The fronts are a little harder, mainly because that shock in there, the spring, is under a lot of compression, so you have to be careful if you're handling that. I ended up actually removing the strut from the truck, taking it to a shop, and had them swap the spring onto the new shocks for $40 for the set. So I was happy with that because I didn't have a spring compressor in my garage, and I didn't really have a way to do it safely. So I'll show you a picture towards the end of the video where I've got the tire off, and I can give you a few tips when it comes to reinstalling those struts. But I would recommend that if you don't have a spring compressor, that's probably the safe way to do things. When I got the 5100s all installed, I did get the truck aligned at a shop for $80, so that wasn't too bad, and made sure everything was good and that I wouldn't have poor tire wear when I got these new tires. With this tire, at the time of filming, there weren't a ton of consumer reviews out there, so I figured I'd throw my 2 cents into the pot. I think these are BFGoodrich's attempt to make a slightly toned down version of their popular KO2 series tires. With this size I went with, the KO2s would have been an E-rated tire, so you'd have a lot of added weight and rolling resistance with those tires. Additionally, with all the added weight, you'd have much higher inertia to overcome, and so acceleration away from lights or as you're driving down the road is definitely more sluggish if you go with those tires. These tires obviously are not going to be able to rock crawl with them as good as the KO2s, but I don't do that very frequently unless I hit a curb in the parking lot at Costco, so they were a better choice for me because I thought the tread pattern was still really aggressive. You get pretty deep treads here, quite deep, deeper than I thought even. It's a really nice pattern. You still get the aggressive sidewall that's inspired by the KO2s. You can see here there are these nice blocks for if you get caught in the mud or sand or snow. That should help you a little bit there. And at the same time, I really haven't noticed any fuel economy loss, even though these are 1 inch in diameter larger than the stock tires that came on this truck. So when I got this truck, it had the Goodyear SRAs from the factory. Those are 275/55 R20s, which are closer to 32 inches in diameter, and these are 33 inches in diameter. They are still the stock width, however, though, so these are not the true, what some people would call 33s, where you've got them a foot wide. I went with the raised white wall lettering on the outside of the tire. I think that really looks sharp compared to just going with the black wall. And one other thing to note on these tires, compared to the competitor tires, these are the triple peak rated for snow. So you get that triple peak badging there and the mud and snow logo, and also one important logo on these to me were the fact that they were made in the USA. So I think that's pretty cool. I shopped around a lot before I decided on what tire to get. Like I said, you know, I considered the KO2, but in my opinion, unnecessary and way too heavy. I didn't want to make the sacrifices to get those. I thought these were a really nice alternative that still look pretty cool and are definitely going to be better than the stock tires, but aren't going to cost you a ton of fuel economy or increase noise and roughness of ride as you drive down the road in the truck. I cross-shopped with the Duratrax or the Wild Peak tires, but kind of in the same category. Those aren't as severe as the KO2s, but they're still quite a bit heavier than the stock tires. They're almost probably 8 pounds heavier than the stock tires, which are 38 pounds. These tires here are only coming in at 42 pounds each. The KO2s, in perspective, are almost 10 pounds heavier. I think 10 on the dot. Those are 48 pounds in this size. Stock wheels, which are the 20/9s with a positive 27 millimeter offset. These tires sit about flush with the side of the truck. You're not really getting any poke out that some people go for, but I think it looks really classy, and I'm not pelting my paint with rocks. Just love how the tread pattern looks from the front. Likewise from the back, you can see that tread pattern pretty nicely from behind the truck, poking out below the mud flaps if you're behind the truck. We'll do some power steering cramps. Full lock to the right. Check things out back there. It's close, but we're not rubbing on the fender liners anywhere. Go around to the other side. This is a side where you can see it's getting a little bit of rub on the upper control arm. That full lock and compression, it seems like. Other than that, looks okay. I'm going to keep an eye on these upper control arms and this ball joint here. Some people like to replace those with a rough country or cognito upper control arm. I may consider that in the future if this wears prematurely. But as you can see, a lot of room for the bump stop here. The good thing about these 5100s is they don't affect your travel distance of your suspension like it would if you put a spacer on the top or the bottom of the strut. Okay, full lock other way. And I've got a pretty tight turn coming out of my driveway, and I've got a curb at the bottom, and haven't heard or noticed any rubbing here either way. Here we go, full lock the other way. You know, that upper control arm is maybe out a little bit, tweaked a little higher than there was on the stock suspension, but looks all right there. But man, this is one winter in Michigan with the salt. Those Bilsteins are already looking a little rough. Here we go, likewise, room to the liner, and that's what our angles look like. Quick video driving here, these are dead silent. Really no added cabin noise compared to the stock tires. Final install tip with these, to let you guys know something that my buddy, the rug doctor, showed me, how to make things go a little easier. Is to, with that, so you don't have to even undo your sway bar or undo the ball joint here. You can actually, if you get a long pry bar, I used the handle of my jack, it was long enough. You go over this you go over the lower control arm and wedge it under the body, and you can pull down a little bit, and that lowers your whole lower assembly here where you're trying to get those two bottom bolts to line up. If you're able to do that, you get that extra clearance where you can drop it in from the top and then pull it up where those three bolts go in the top of your shock tower. That really helped me. And then once you get those three seated, you don't need to worry about lining up that those bottom two bolt holes necessarily, because once you get those top three seated, you can rotate this middle silver part. So this is a fun picture to reminisce on because I actually got to install these while having COVID, getting over COVID and isolating. So it was pretty sweaty here, but it was a fun, feverish job to do last August. So overall, final thoughts. I love the upgrade for, the tires were $1,100 installed at Costco. The suspension parts, all the Bilstein 5100s. By the time I got four of those, that's probably another $450 or $500. $40 for the springs to get mounted, and call it $100 alignment. You're still under $2,000 for, I think, a really nice suspension upgrade. That still leaves the truck pretty functional as opposed to putting on crazy high offset tires or a big lift kit. But to each their own, right? Everybody's got their own thing. But so yeah, at the end of the day, I would recommend it. But wanted to make this video to get the information out there because I struggled for the longest time. The GM Truck Forum has really good resources, but their search feature doesn't work very well, or at least I can't figure out how to work it. Um, there are a lot of mixed opinions whether 275/60s would fit on these. I seem to fit them pretty easily with not even a 2-inch level in the front. So just trying to help folks out, and hopefully you guys gain some knowledge watching this.